For decades, the WNBA's biggest talent threat came from Europe or China. Now it's coming from within. Sue Bird has made it unmistakably clear. Leagues like Unrivaled and Project B aren't side projects. They're business competitors. The players founding them aren't just chasing supplemental income. They're constructing alternatives with the same players, same fans, and same sponsors the WNBA needs to survive. And because these leagues are being spearheaded by union leaders and active players.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
The boundaries between advocacy and ambition are vanishing fast. Folder not found. Create new folder. Sue Bird, speaking. Bird is warning that the WNBA can't pretend these rival leagues are harmless experiments. They're taking aim at the league's most valuable asset, visibility. Without exclusive control over media, endorsements, and marquee talent, the WNBA loses its competitive edge in the U.S. sports market. It becomes just one of several options rather than the stage for elite women's basketball. Bird's critique isn't a condemnation of ambition. It's a call for clarity. If leaders want to build new ventures, they can't do it while steering the old one into uncertainty. Sue Bird has officially had enough. In one of the most pointed public statements the WNBA has seen in years, Bird took direct aim at what she sees as the league's most dangerous internal threat. Not a rival team, not a bad contract, not even the usual media neglect. C and LH her target? Players like Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hall. Why? Because they're involved in launching rival leagues while simultaneously holding positions of influence within the WNBA structure. And for Sue Bird, that's a deal breaker. She didn't just criticize them. She said they should be fired. This is more than just a spicy headline. It's a crisis moment for the WNBA, one that cuts deep into the foundation the league is trying to build. Bird's comments are a sharp indictment of what she calls a dangerous double standard. Players working from inside the WNBA system while actively developing leagues designed to compete with it. And not just compete, but challenge the WNBA's very role as the premier women's basketball league in America. Let's be clear. Bird isn't against innovation. She isn't against players getting paid. What she's calling out is the conflict of interest at the heart of this growing fracture in the league's identity. When union leaders or high-profile athletes are helping build leagues like Unrivaled and Project B, while also negotiating with the WNBA for better conditions, it muddies everything. Loyalty, strategy, bargaining, it all becomes compromised. Because how can you sit at the table fighting for higher WNBA salaries when your other job is launching a league that hopes to outpay and outshine the WNBA? That's the contradiction Bird is exposing. And it's not just theoretical. It's already unfolding in real time. Unrivaled and Project B aren't weekend side projects. They're being positioned as full-fledged alternatives to the WNBA. They're vying for the same media coverage, the same sponsor dollars, the same attention from fans and brands. And more importantly, they're luring WNBA players with promises of bigger checks, more creative freedom, and control over their careers. To many, that sounds like progress. To Sue Bird, it's a business threat dressed up in feel-good messaging. Because here's the part that rarely gets said. The WNBA's strength isn't just in talent. It's in perception. Its legitimacy, value, and influence are all built on the idea that it is the platform for the best in women's basketball. That perception powers its endorsement deals, its broadcast partnerships, and its media presence. If that changes, if rival leagues become seen as just as valid or even more attractive, then the WNBA starts losing leverage fast. And once that exclusivity goes, it's incredibly hard to get back. Bird points out something that often gets overlooked. The WNBA's market power isn't purely based on salaries. It's based on visibility, American TV deals, commercial campaigns, nationally recognized team brands. She knows firsthand that what makes a player marketable isn't just how many points they score, it's where they play and how that league positions them. So when rival leagues start offering not just money but visibility, the WNBA's core selling point starts to crack. And let's be honest, cracks are already showing. Bird doesn't accuse every player involved in Unrivaled or Project B of malicious intent. What she's saying is this: the ethical lines have been blurred, and it's hurting the league. And when those blurred lines involve union leadership or high-profile athletes with decision-making power, it's not just ethically murky, it's destabilizing. You can't simultaneously claim to be negotiating for the best interests of WNBA players while also building a rival that benefits if the WNBA falters. It's one or the other. And that's why Bird said what she said. That's why names like Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull came up. It's not personal. It's structural. It's about trust. When players see their leadership using the WNBA platform to quietly funnel energy and attention toward new product, the trust erodes. When sponsors see WNBA players splitting their brand loyalty between leagues, they hesitate. When fans see top players hyping up new leagues while barely engaging with their current one, they start to wonder what exactly they're investing in. This is the erosion Bird's talking about. Not a scandal in the tabloid sense, but a slow leak that could drain everything the WNBA has spent years building. And here's the part that makes it worse. Nobody wants to talk about it. Bird makes it clear. This issue has been simmering for a while, but no one wants to confront it head-on. There's fear. There's politics. There's a desire to keep things positive. But positivity doesn't build stability. Transparency does. Accountability does. What Bird is asking for isn't drama. It's clarity. If players want to create something new, fine, but they shouldn't be allowed to do it from inside a league they're undermining. And they definitely shouldn't be allowed to hold leadership roles in the union while doing so. Because once the WNBA loses trust in its own infrastructure, its contracts, its negotiations, its leadership, it starts to lose its foundation. And for what? A short-term gain? Bird's deeper concern is the long game. She knows that rival leagues like Unrivaled only exist because the WNBA hasn't fixed its compensation model. She's not pretending the current system is perfect. She's not defending low salaries or limited travel options. What she's saying is that you don't solve those issues by burning down the one place that's even trying. You build on it. You push it. You improve it. But you don't secretly profit from its weakness while pretending to lead it. That's not leadership. That's exploitation. And it's especially damaging because the WNBA has built its brand on activism, community, and integrity. So when those values start getting tangled up in personal ambition and off-the-books agendas, the brand doesn't just suffer, it fractures. Sue Bird sees where this is headed. If the WNBA doesn't act soon, if it doesn't define the line between leadership and competition, it won't just lose players. It'll lose its identity. And right now, that identity is everything. So the question becomes, who is the WNBA really for? Is it a player-first league that holds itself accountable? Or is it a launching pad for individual business ventures that treat the league as disposable once they've gotten what they need? Because if it's the latter, sponsors will notice, fans will notice, and players, especially younger ones trying to build careers, will get caught in the crossfire. That's the fire Sue Bird is trying to put out, or at least call attention to before it burns everything down. Now it's time for the league to respond, not with vague statements or lip service, but with real policy, real standards, real consequences. Because if nothing changes and this internal conflict keeps spreading, the WNBA won't fall with a bang. It'll fade, quietly, slowly, and avoidably. Tell us what you think. Was Sue Bird right to call out this conflict? Should union leaders or influential players be allowed to build rival leagues while still inside the WNBA? And if not, what should the consequences be? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you want transparency over politicking. And subscribe to stay locked in as this story keeps unfolding. Because this isn't just a feud, it's a turning point. Let's keep going, because this story isn't cooling off anytime soon. Sue Bird didn't just pull back the curtain. She ripped the whole thing down. And now the entire league is exposed. Its values, its fractures, and its silence. The issue here isn't a petty feud. It's not a generational divide or a difference in philosophy. It's much bigger than that. It's about the survival of the WNBA as a functioning, trusted institution in the face of an identity crisis it wasn't prepared for. Sue Bird said out loud what a lot of insiders have been whispering for months. The league's biggest threat isn't coming from the outside. It's coming from within. And unless the WNBA deals with the conflict of interest happening at the leadership level, it's going to implode under the weight of its own contradictions. Let's go back to the root of this. You have union leaders who are actively building rival leagues. You have players negotiating for better conditions in the WNBA while simultaneously designing an alternative platform that directly competes for the same resources: media attention, corporate sponsorship, and public interest. That is not a minor ethics concern. That is a structural breakdown in how leadership and loyalty are supposed to function. And it's not hypothetical anymore. It's happening right now. Sue Bird is pointing to people like Sophie Cunningham and Lexie not just because they're involved in these competing ventures, but because their participation reveals the deeper rot. Players using their WNBA status to elevate a separate product, all while enjoying the benefits of the league they're undermining. And let's be clear, it is undermining. These rival leagues, unrivaled in Project B, are not just cute off-season showcases. They're not basketball for the culture pop-ups. They're business ventures with investor dollars, strategic media pushes, and plans to eventually dominate the very same market the WNBA currently occupies. They want the attention. They want the money. They want the power. And they're being built by the very people the WNBA has trusted to lead the fight for players. That's the double game Bird is calling out. It's not just messy. It's dangerous, because it means the collective bargaining process is no longer clean. When the people at the negotiating table are already invested in the failure of the current system, how can that system evolve in good faith? It can't. This isn't about being against player empowerment. Sue Bird has been the blueprint for that. But empowerment without accountability is chaos. And that's what we're watching now. Chaos disguised as progress. Distraction dressed up as disruption. And what does the WNBA leadership do in response? Nothing. No press conference. No public clarification. No lines drawn. That silence? It's not neutral. It's complicity. Because every day the league refuses to take a stance on this conflict of interest, it sends a message. We're okay with our leaders having split allegiances. We're okay with weakening our own brand. We're okay watching the WNBA get cannibalized from the inside as long as we can pretend it's all growth. But here's the truth Bird is forcing everyone to confront. You cannot protect a league by appeasing the people dismantling it. If players want to go start something new, fine. That's their right. But they don't get to keep one foot inside the WNBA just long enough to boost their profile, exploit the league's infrastructure, and use it as a springboard for their next move. That's not innovation. That's opportunism. And it's exhausting for the players who are loyal to the WNBA, the ones who are still fully bought in, the ones who want to grow the league from the inside. Because what message are we sending to them? That commitment doesn't matter. That power only comes from building outside the system. Sue Bird is saying what they can't. This is not sustainable. And let's talk about what happens next if nothing changes. Sponsors will start asking harder questions. Media companies won't know who to back. Young players coming into the league won't know where to invest their energy. And the identity of the WNBA, already blurry in the eyes of casual fans, will start to dissolve entirely. Because how can you sell the WNBA as the platform when its own stars are sending mixed signals? Let's not forget, the WNBA isn't operating with the same margin for error as the NBA or NFL. Every sponsor, every headline, every dollar counts. The league's brand is still fragile. The business model is still maturing. And the window for solidifying its cultural authority is right now. This is not the time for internal confusion. And yet, the silence remains. That's why Sue Bird went public. Because she knows that the longer this drags on, the more irreversible the damage becomes. If the WNBA doesn't reclaim its message, someone else will write it for them. And right now, rival leagues are more than happy to do that. They're branding themselves as player-run, community-focused, equity-first. Sounds familiar? That's because they're borrowing the WNBA's values, while quietly setting themselves up to replace it. And that's the ultimate betrayal, not just to the league, but to the fans who've invested in this system. who've stuck around during the growing pains, who've defended the league through every slow news cycle, every lopsided paycheck, every tired, no one watches women's basketball narrative. Those fans deserve better. They deserve a league that's clear about who it serves, a league that protects its players and its structure, a league that knows the difference between evolution and erosion. Sue Bird understands that. That's why she's not mincing words. She's not saying rival leagues shouldn't exist. She's saying they shouldn't be built on the WNBA's back. And they definitely shouldn't be driven by people still collecting WNBA paychecks and using WNBA press to build credibility. If you're building something new, step away from the old. Be honest about your motives. Take your risk. But don't try to play both sides and call it progress. Because eventually you have to choose. And that's where we are now. It's time for the league to choose. For the union to choose. For the players to choose. What are we building? Who's this league for? And who has the courage to lead it with integrity? Because the WNBA can survive bad headlines. It can survive slow starts and public criticism. But it cannot survive a leadership class that sees the league as optional. That's what Sue Bird is warning against. This moment? It's not just a scandal. It's a test. Let's keep it going because we're nowhere near done. Sue Bird didn't say what she said for attention. She said it because someone had to. Because the WNBA is approaching a point of no return, and the silence from leadership is turning into a liability. Let's stop pretending this is just a conversation. This is a credibility crisis. And the league's inability to address the growing conflict of interest is opening the door for confusion, mistrust, and ultimately, decline. Quiet decline. The kind that doesn't make headlines right away, but chips away at everything from within. You think sponsors aren't noticing? You think agents aren't watching this unfold and rethinking their player strategies? You think the next generation of rookies, some of whom are coming in with huge fan bases already, aren't looking around and wondering if the WNBA is still the destination or just a pit stop? That's what this is really about. Sue Bird is trying to preserve something bigger than a paycheck. She's fighting to protect the meaning of the WNBA. Because right now, that meaning is being rewritten in real time by people who are treating the league like a ladder, not a home. And look, let's talk about the money over loyalty angle because that hit a nerve. Sue Bird didn't accuse players of being greedy. She understands how underpaid and overworked WNBA athletes have been for years. She lived that. But what she's saying is this. When loyalty to a dollar completely replaces loyalty to the league stops having because the WNBA isn't just a product. It's a platform built on trust, investment, and shared sacrifice. That trust is what makes the brand valuable. That's what makes people care. The second that loyalty is gone, the WNBA becomes just another brand fighting for survival in a sea of new ones. And let's be honest, if rival leagues can offer more money and equal exposure, the WNBA loses its edge. Bird warned us. The WNBA's strength is its cultural positioning. It's on ESPN. It's got Nike. It's in the national conversation. If another league replicates that and offers more cash, what's keeping players here? Nothing, unless the league protects its ecosystem. That's where the conflict of interest becomes so dangerous. Because when the people who are supposed to be reinforcing the WNBA structure are the same people setting up its competition, the entire system becomes unstable. It's not just a messy look. It's a fundamental threat to the league's survival. Sue Bird is basically saying, if we don't fix this now, there might not be anything left to fix later. And a response from the league? Still nothing. No investigation. No ethics review. No public acknowledgement. Just the sound of power being avoided at all costs. You'd think that with someone of Bird's stature raising these alarms, the WNBA would move, would say something. But so far, the strategy seems to be hoping it all fades out. That fans will get distracted. That sponsors won't ask tough questions. That players won't press the issue. That's a mistake. Because the more this festers, the more trust the league loses. You can't preach empowerment while tolerating opportunism. You can't market sisterhood when leadership is divided. And you definitely can't tell fans that the WNBA is the pinnacle of the sport while letting key players promote alternatives without consequence. There has to be a line, a standard. Sue Bird drew it herself when she said certain players should be fired. And whether or not you agree with her, you have to understand what that moment represents. Someone finally saying the quiet part out loud. That if you betray the league's mission, you don't belong in it. That's not personal. That's structural. That's survival. The league doesn't have the luxury of pretending these issues will sort themselves out. Not in this media climate. Not in this economy. Not with rival leagues offering fresh branding, big checks, and the illusion of freedom. What Sue Bird is demanding is discipline. Not punishment for the sake of optics, but a realignment of priorities. She's calling for accountability that protects the whole league, not just individual ambition. And the truth is, it shouldn't fall on her to say it. Where's the commissioner? Where is the union leadership? Where's the official guidance that makes clear what is and isn't acceptable from players in leadership positions? Right now, the absence of boundaries is being exploited. And if the WNBA can't defend itself against internal threats, then it's not ready for the external ones either. Because make no mistake, this moment is being watched. Rival leagues are taking notes. Investors are calculating risk. And every day that goes by without clarity from the WNBA is another inch of ground lost to competitors who are willing to define who they are and what they stand for. This isn't just about Sophie Cunningham. It's not just about Lexie Hull. It's about whether the league has the courage to protect itself. And if it doesn't, then what's left? So let's open the floor. What do you think the WNBA should do next? Is it time for a code of conduct around conflicts of interest? Should league players and union leadership be banned from building rival leagues? Or has the business evolved beyond that kind of structure? Sound off in the comments. Like if you're here for a stronger, clearer WNBA. And subscribe if you want every uncomfortable truth, every rising scandal, and every behind-the-scenes power shift that's reshaping the future of women's basketball. Because this conversation, it's far from over.